On her wedding day, my daughter looked at me, a father who gave up his savings for her dress, and said I had never helped her. I remember the first time I held her in my arms, so small that I was afraid she might slip away if I wasn't careful enough. That night, in the quiet of the hospital, I promised myself I would give her a better life than the one I had. I was young, broke and scared, but when her tiny hand closed around my finger, something inside me shifted. I stopped thinking about myself and started thinking only of her future. Every dream I had became tied to her smile. Every sacrifice I made felt lighter when I saw her take her first steps, say her first words, and laugh for the first time. I wasn't perfect. I stumbled, I failed, but I was always there, quietly, steadily, like a shadow that never leaves, even when no one notices. Her childhood was painted with little battles I fought behind the scenes, battles she never saw. I worked 2 jobs at times, just so she could have her favorite dolls or the new shoes she needed when her feet grew faster than I could save money. There were nights I came home so exhausted that my back screamed in pain, but I still sat on the floor with her, letting her braid my hair with toy clips, laughing as she called me her handsome prince. I didn't have much to give, not in the way other fathers gave, no expensive vacations, no shiny gifts, but I gave her everything I had, my time, my hands, my heart, and every time she looked at me with those bright, trusting eyes, I thought, this is enough. But as she grew older, I began to notice the distance forming, like a thin line on glass that slowly spreads until the whole surface is fractured. She wanted the things I couldn't always afford, the kind of life her friends flaunted on social media. I saw the way she looked at me sometimes, as if I was falling short, as if love and effort weren't enough without money to dress them up. I told myself it was just adolescence, just a phase, that she would one day understand what it cost me to put food on the table, to pay for her books, to keep the lights on. I swallowed my pride, kept working, and tried to bridge the gap with patience even when I felt her slipping through my fingers. There was one night I'll never forget. She was 17, and she came home in tears because her classmates laughed at her dress. It wasn't brand new, it was second-hand, but I had chosen it carefully, cleaned and mended it until it looked fresh. When I saw her crying, my chest ached. I wanted to tell her I had skipped lunch for weeks just to buy it, but I stayed silent. Instead, I held her, whispered that beauty didn't come from price tags, that she carried a light no one could dim. She didn't believe me. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, wondering if love without wealth would ever be enough for her. Time marched on, as it always does. College applications came, bills piled up, and I tightened my belt further. I sold my old guitar, the one thing I had kept for myself since I was a boy, so I could help pay her fees. She never knew that. To her, it was just something parents are supposed to do. But to me, it was a piece of my soul I willingly parted with because her future was worth more than my past. Every dollar I saved, every extra shift I worked, every dream I delayed, it was all her. And though she didn't say thank you often, I kept believing she would one day look back and see the invisible battles I fought for her. Then came the day she told me she was engaged. Her eyes sparkled the way they used to when she was little, when Christmas lights filled her with wonder. I wanted to capture that moment and hold it forever. She spoke of venues, flowers, and dresses with such excitement, and I smiled, nodding even as my stomach twisted. I knew weddings were expensive, and I also knew my savings were modest, barely enough to keep me afloat. Still, when she mentioned the dress, her voice trembling with desire, I felt something break inside me. She wanted a gown far beyond her means, and without a second thought, I offered my savings. It wasn't just money, it was my safety net, my years of sacrifice tucked away in an envelope. But when she tried it on, tears in her eyes whispering, "It's perfect," I told myself it was worth it. Those weeks leading to the wedding were a blur of chaos and emotion. I worked extra shifts to cover the gap my savings had left, waking before dawn and coming home past midnight. Some nights, I sat at the kitchen table with aching hands, staring at the bills, wondering if I'd make it through. But every time I saw her radiant, twirling in her dress, I convinced myself the struggle was temporary, that the memory of her happiness would outlast the pain in my body. I didn't tell anyone how much it cost me, not even her. I wanted her day to be perfect, unshadowed by my sacrifices. The morning of the wedding arrived, golden light spilling across the sky like a promise. I stood in my worn suit, rehearsing the speech I wanted to give her. Words about love, about sacrifice, about the bond between father and daughter. I wanted to tell her how proud I was, how much I believed in her, how every scar on my hands was proof of my devotion. But when I saw her in that dress, my savings stitched into every fold, I choked up. She was beautiful, breathtaking, and for a moment I felt like all the years of struggle had led to this single, shining moment. But beauty doesn't shield you from cruelty. At the reception, laughter and clinking glasses filled the air, and someone asked her who had helped most with the wedding. I waited, not for recognition, but for acknowledgement, for her to see me, even just for a second. Instead, she smiled, lifted her glass and said, "I did it all myself. No one ever really helped me." The words sliced through me, sharper than any knife. My chest tightened, my ears rang, and for the first time in my life, I felt invisible to my own child. I sat there, forcing a smile, while inside me decades of sacrifices screamed for recognition. The dress, the bills, the sleepless nights, the dreams I buried, it all flickered before my eyes like a cruel film reel. No one noticed my silence. No one saw the storm behind my eyes. She laughed, radiant, while I sat in the corner swallowing my pride, pretending it didn't matter. But it did. It mattered more than anything. And in that moment, I realized something painful. Sometimes love isn't seen until it's too late. And sometimes the ones we sacrifice for are the very ones who forget the cost of our devotion. The words echoed in my head like a cruel refrain. No one ever really helped me. I tried to convince myself I misheard, that maybe she meant something else, but every smile, every nod of agreement from the crowd around her drove the knife deeper. My hands trembled under the table, my throat burned, and I felt my heart pounding so loudly I thought others could hear it. I looked at her, radiant in the dress I had bled for, and I wondered if she truly didn't see me, or if she chose not to. Was I so small in her eyes, so insignificant, that years of sacrifice could vanish in one careless sentence? Memories flooded me, not in gentle waves, but in a violent storm. I saw myself walking in the rain, tired from work, carrying groceries in one hand, and her schoolbooks in the other. I saw the nights I went without meals so she could have enough. I saw the calluses on my palms, the backaches, the hours stolen from my own dreams, and yet none of that existed in her words. To her I had been absent. To her I had never helped. I bit my lip until I tasted blood, fighting the urge to stand up and shout the truth to everyone in that room. But pride, mine and hers, kept me chained to the chair. I thought of all the times I had chosen silence over recognition. When she cried about that second-hand dress, I stayed quiet. When she rolled her eyes at my old car, I stayed quiet. When she said she wished she had been born into another family, I swallowed the hurt and stayed quiet. And now, on the day that should have been our most beautiful memory, my silence seemed to have erased me completely. I wanted to scream, "I was there, I gave you everything," but my voice caught in my throat, strangled by years of swallowing my pain. The hall felt smaller with every passing second, the laughter sharper, the lights brighter, until I could barely breathe. I glanced around, strangers clinking glasses, relatives congratulating her, friends gushing about her independence. Not one of them knew. Not one of them had seen me collapse on the bathroom floor from exhaustion, had seen me patch up holes in my shoes so I wouldn't have to buy new ones, had seen me sit alone at night counting coins like a beggar just to make her life easier. My truth was invisible, and in that moment I wondered if my life had been invisible too. And then her eyes met mine. Just for a second. I don't know what she saw, a father broken, a man who had given everything and received nothing, but she quickly looked away, laughing again with her friends. That fleeting glance burned me more than her words. It was as if she knew deep down that I was hurt, but chose to ignore it to preserve her image, her story of independence. I clenched my fists under the table, nails digging into my skin, reminding myself that I could still feel, that I wasn't a ghost. Not yet. I stood up slowly, my legs heavy as stone, and walked toward the door. Every step felt like I was dragging chains behind me, chains forged from years of love, unacknowledged. I heard whispers, "Is he okay?" But I didn't answer. I reached the exit and paused, my hand on the doorframe, torn between leaving quietly and turning back to say everything I had held in for decades. My heart screamed to speak, but my pride whispered that it was useless. Would my words matter now, when her belief was already cemented in front of everyone? Would they hear me, or would they dismiss me as a bitter old man trying to steal her moment? I turned back. My voice cracked the silence of the hall as I called her name. Heads turned. Conversations hushed, and suddenly all eyes were on me. My daughter froze, her smile faltering, as if she never expected me to break character. I walked toward her, trembling, each step fueled by pain and love intertwined. "You said no one helped you," I began, my voice unsteady but loud enough for all to hear. "But every day of my life has been a help you'll never see. Every scar on my hands, every sleepless night, every dream I buried, it was all for you." Gasps rippled through the crowd, but I didn't stop. The words poured out of me like a dam breaking after years of pressure. "That dress you're wearing? It isn't just fabric and lace. It's my savings. It's the dinners I skipped, the guitar I sold, the years I spent working when my body begged me to stop. You stand there shining because I chose to dim my own light for you, and if that isn't help, then maybe I don't know what the word means anymore." My chest heaved. my voice raw, but I felt lighter with every truth spoken. Her face paled, her mouth opened, but no words came out. The hall was silent now, the weight of my confession hanging in the air. I looked at her, not with anger, but with the deep, aching sorrow of a father who had loved too much and been unseen. Tears blurred my vision, but I didn't hide them. For the first time, I allowed the world to see the man behind the sacrifices, and for the first time I wondered if love should have been quieter, or if it should have demanded to be seen all along. I stepped back, my voice trembling as I whispered, "I never wanted credit. I only wanted you to know I was there." And then, without waiting for her response, I turned away. The silence behind me was deafening, but inside there was a strange peace. I had spoken. I had broken decades of silence. Whether she understood or not, whether she ever forgave herself or not, I had finally let the truth breathe. And though my heart ached, it no longer carried the unbearable weight of invisibility. For the first time in years, I felt free. When I stepped out into the cool night air, the weight of the hall slipped from my shoulders, though the heaviness in my chest remained. The muffled laughter and music behind me seemed like a cruel echo of a world I no longer belonged to. For years, my entire existence had revolved around her, and now in one moment I had been reduced to nothing but a shadow in her story. Yet as I breathed in the silence of the evening, I felt something I had long forgotten, the right to exist for myself. For decades, my life had been defined by sacrifice, by the constant refrain of for her, for her, for her. But outside those doors, alone under the night sky, I realized I was still a man, not just a father, and my heart still beat for reasons beyond her recognition. I walked slowly across the empty parking lot, each step feeling both heavy and liberating. My thoughts wandered to the years I had lost, dreams abandoned, passions left to wither, moments of joy postponed in the name of duty. I thought of the guitar I sold, the books I never bought, the travels I never took, all for her. I used to believe that love meant giving until you had nothing left, but now I questioned if that had been love or blindness. True love should never erase you. It should never make you invisible. I had raised my daughter to shine, but in the process, I had extinguished myself. That night I asked for the first time, was it worth it? The wind brushed against my face, carrying with it the faint sound of celebration inside. For years, I had dreamed of this day as one of joy, a day where she would hold my hand, look me in the eyes, and acknowledge even just a fraction of what I had given. Instead, I had been erased, a ghost in her story. Yet strangely, I did not regret speaking. For the first time, I had claimed my own truth. And though it burned, it also healed. My pain had finally been given a voice, and with that voice came a strange kind of freedom. Freedom to admit I was human, flawed, and deserving of recognition. I sat on the hood of my car, staring at the stars that blinked faintly through the city's glow. How many nights had I sat like this alone, dreaming not for myself but for her? How many times had I begged the universe to give her the life I never had? I thought of the little girl who once braided my hair with toy clips, who once held my hand at the park, who once whispered, "Daddy, you're my hero." Somewhere along the way, that little girl had grown, and the world had convinced her that heroes are measured in money, in grandeur, in the things I could never give. And yet, in my heart, I knew I had been a hero, not perfect but real. The door to the hall opened behind me, and for a moment, I expected her to come out, to run into my arms, to apologize with tears in her eyes. But it wasn't her. It was a stranger stepping out to smoke, barely noticing me. That moment broke something inside me, but also rebuilt something else. I realized that I had been waiting for validation that might never come. I had lived too long measuring my worth through her eyes, waiting for a thank you, a recognition, a glance of love. But maybe the transformation I needed wasn't hers, it was mine, to finally stop begging for acknowledgement and to find it within myself. I closed my eyes and let the night speak to me. I remembered my own father, a quiet man who worked himself to the bone and never once asked for gratitude. I hadn't understood him then. I thought he was distant. Now I realized he had loved in the same invisible way I had loved my daughter. Perhaps I had simply inherited the same curse, to give until unnoticed. But unlike him, I still had a chance to rewrite the ending of my story. I didn't have to die unseen. I could choose from that night onward to reclaim the parts of me I had buried. The decision didn't come with fireworks or sudden clarity. It was quiet, steady, like a seed planted deep inside. I would continue to love my daughter, but not at the cost of erasing myself. I would support her if she asked, but I would no longer sacrifice every piece of me for someone who couldn't see me. My love would remain, but it would no longer consume me. For once, I would save something for me, my time, my dreams, my joy. The hall behind me erupted in another wave of cheers, muffled through the walls. A part of me ached to go back inside, to try again, to mend what had been broken. But another part, the stronger part, whispered that some wounds need time and some truths cannot be forced. If she one day came to me, I would be there, open arms and open heart, ready to forgive. But until then, I could not keep tearing myself open in the hope she would finally see. My life, too, deserved light. As I drove away, the city lights flickering in the rearview mirror, I felt the ache in my chest shift into something softer, almost bearable. For years I had carried the weight of invisibility, but that night I had spoken, and the silence had shattered. She might not have heard me, not yet, but I had heard myself, and that was the beginning of healing. I whispered into the night, not for her, but for me. I was enough. I am enough. And for the first time in decades, I believed it. The road stretched before me, dark and endless, yet for the first time in years, I felt no rush to reach the destination. I drove with the windows down, letting the night air wash over me, as if it could cleanse the heaviness from my chest. My thoughts wandered, not just to her, but to myself, to the boy I once was, the man I became, and the man I still had the chance to be. I realized that life had not ended in that hall. It had only shifted. The chapter of sacrifice had closed, and a new one was waiting to be written, one where my story wasn't just a footnote in hers. As I stopped at a red light, I saw my reflection in the glass of a shop window. For a moment I didn't recognize the man staring back at me. His face was worn, lined with years of toil, but his eyes, though tired, held something new, defiance, strength, a quiet acceptance that he had given all he could, and that was enough. I lifted my chin, almost as if I were meeting myself for the first time, and I thought, this man is worth something. This man deserves to live, not just survive. I began to imagine the life I had set aside for so long. Simple things, reading books that had collected dust on my shelves, sitting in a park with no hurry to leave, maybe buying another guitar, letting music return to my hands after decades of silence. Dreams didn't have to be grand to matter. They only had to be mine. For too long, I had lived in borrowed dreams, sacrificing every ounce of myself for someone else's journey. Now it was time to remember that I was also allowed to dream, to want, to live. But even as I imagined, my heart pulled me back to her. She was still my daughter. My love for her hadn't died that night. It never would. Love is strange that way. It survives even when unacknowledged, even when it hurts. I knew I would always be there if she came to me, if she finally looked past herself and saw me not as the invisible provider, but as a father who had loved her fiercely. Forgiveness was already in my heart, but until that day came, I would not let her blindness erase me anymore. I pulled over by the river, the city lights shimmering on the water, and I sat in silence. I thought of every parent out there, unseen and unheard, who gives everything and receives little in return. I thought of the fathers and mothers who sit quietly at weddings, graduations, birthdays, watching their sacrifices be forgotten, their presence overlooked, and I realized I wasn't alone. My story was one of millions. My pain was shared by countless hearts that beat quietly in the background of someone else's spotlight. So maybe this was my purpose now, to speak, not just for myself, but for all of us, to remind the world that behind every smile in a white dress, every graduate in a cap and gown, every child who makes it further than their parents did, there is often a silent figure in the shadows, carrying the weight. We are invisible until we choose not to be. And maybe, just maybe, by sharing my truth, someone else will find the courage to speak theirs. The river whispered to me that night, telling me that invisibility is not the same as worthlessness. Just because we are not seen does not mean we do not matter. Our love, our sacrifices, our devotion, they are the invisible threads that hold generations together. And while recognition is sweet, the truth is that what we give still shapes the world, even if it goes unsaid. Still, there is a time when silence must end, and mine ended tonight. I took a deep breath and felt a strange sense of rebirth. I wasn't just a father anymore. I was a man who had loved, suffered, and spoken. A man who could still build, still dream, still find joy in the small corners of life. I wasn't broken, I was transforming. The scars on my hands, the ache in my back, the lines on my face, they weren't signs of defeat. They were proof that I had lived, that I had carried love like a fire, and though it burned me, it never went out. Driving home, I realized I had no idea what the future held. Maybe she would call me one day, voice trembling with regret. Maybe she never would. But either way, I had taken my step forward. I had spoken my truth, and I would never go back to silence again. My life would not be defined only by sacrifice, but by resilience, by the choice to rise, even when unseen. And if anyone someday heard my story, maybe they would pause and look at their own parents differently. Maybe they would notice the quiet sacrifices that often go unspoken. Maybe they would pick up the phone, say, "Thank you," say, I see you. If even one person did that after hearing my words, then my pain would have found a purpose beyond myself. So to those who listen now, to those who feel invisible in their love, I say this: you are not alone. Your sacrifices matter. Your love, though unseen, is the foundation on which others stand. And even if your children never say it, even if the world never notices, you have done something extraordinary. You have loved without conditions. That is not weakness, it is power. And to those who receive such love, I beg you, look closer. See the hands that built your world. See the tired eyes that watched over you. See the quiet hearts that bled in silence so you could shine. Don't wait until it's too late to recognize them. Don't let the ones who carried you feel invisible. Gratitude is the light that keeps love alive. Speak it while you still can. I may not have heard those words from my daughter tonight, but I have spoken them for myself, and perhaps one day she will echo them back to me. Until then, I walk forward, not as a ghost, but as a man who lived, who gave, who loved, and who finally chose to be seen. So if my story reaches you, let it stir something inside. Let it remind you to call, to thank, to love out loud. Don't let silence bury what matters most. For one day, when the music fades and the crowd is gone, the only thing that remains is the truth of who stood by you, unseen but unyielding. And if tonight has taught me anything, it's this: love unspoken is still love, but love recognized can heal generations. So speak it, share it, live it, and never again let the ones who carried you fade into the shadows. Because sometimes the most powerful story isn't the one of the bride in the white dress. It's the one of the tired hands that made it possible and the heart that loved enough to give everything.